Hi peeps, it's Tersse back on the old squat box once again, and I'm doing something that I haven't done for quite some time, I believe, and that is talk about, well, Britain, my own country as it happens. So I'm going to start this conversation, well, this dialogue, or monologue rather, this monologue, yeah, I'll get it right sooner or later. This monologue with the BBC. The BBC basically has been fighting a losing battle, several losing battles over the last sort of 30 years, 3 decades. The first battle it had was when the airways were eventually, gradually being released to private enterprise competition. As you know, the BBC at first didn't have any competition, but especially in the last 3 decades, they've really faced fierce competition in the way that television is delivered to people. It's now a broad sweep of different media types now, but 30 years ago it was basically just TV. They were fighting for stations. The BBC did get the largest lump of stations. I mean, we've got BBC 1, 2, 3 and 4 now, and that's just the TV side of things. They also do a lot of overseas broadcasting, British World Service. And they had several radio stations, I think fucking seven BBC radio stations, at least 7. But gradually they've lost the battle of holding that side of the media to themselves, and we eventually had Channel 4, obviously you had ITV, STV, West Midlands TV, Wales TV, Irish TV, but the independent television stations, they always had their side of things anyway. But then you had Channel 4, Channel 5, and then eventually in the last 2 decades they've gradually had to be fighting for the airwaves with Sky and Sky B, and now we've got Virgin and several other media types that are pushing into but mostly the online market. The BBC have had terrible failings in the way they've dealt with their management. They always seem to bring in old boys, old people who had already worked for the network for years, or were involved, or in the background. There were people who were either working already for the BBC somewhere, or they were giving the BBC advice, on how to hold their audience and stuff like that. As well as having people in politics fighting for them along the lines of extending the licence, fee, and increasing the licence fee, etc. So the BBC over the last 3 decades has gradually lost nearly all of those battles, and now we see they're having a real problem as well, because the people who were in power over the last, certainly the last 3 decades, and probably the last 4 or 5. Old boy network, don't rock the boat, never let anything out that you don't need to let out, don't let anybody know how the system works. And now it's all coming home to roost now with the Jimmy Savile disruptions, several of the BBC commissioners, general manager, whatever you call them, the guy that runs the GG of the BBC. I think we're on the 3rd one in 3 months, Simply because that they've never really understood how the media works, and the people that they've had giving them, advice, have never really understood the way that the media was changing. The BBC basically tried to put up a barrier to change. They tried to make sure that they had as little change as possible, and everything stayed and remained the way it was. The way we've done it has always been good up till now, why should we change? All that kind of thing. The BBC need a real radical change, and I don't see the guy that's coming in as the man that's going to do it either. So the new head of the BBC is much like the old head of the BBC who left just this week, who only took over from the old head of the BBC a month ago. It's just ridiculous. The BBC really need to fucking wisen up. They need to get some younger people in there. They need to actually go and headhunt from people like Virgin, Sky, you know. People who have been working in there and are unhappy with the way they've been treated, and the way that even these organisations, STIMI and you know, crowd out innovation, you know. The BBC could learn a lot by looking at how the you know, the online media is developing now, and try and take some of that juice. Some of the young people who are leaving universities now and moving into the media, they should be trying to capture those people and bring them in at the top floor. Not bring them in on the ground floor, let them work their way through, no, bring them right in at the top floor as an executive, working alongside some of the directors, producers, and the you know, the people who write the rules in the BBC, because the rules need to be changed. They need to be modernised, updated. They could probably do it, and I would think about 3 to 5 years. They could totally change the BBC into being a completely modern sort of deliverer of media. If only they could listen to people who are now coming into the new media forms, you know, that they're seeing across the world now, and bring some of that to the BBC. I think the BBC could capitalise on it and remain a stalwart, wanted, needed and desired you know, deliverer of media, you know, in the world. Because if they keep going the way they're going now and bringing in all these old fogies and the basically, how do you say it, faux sort of media presenters that we're getting now, modernisation is where it's at. They really need to fucking step it up, and they really need to change. Anyway, that's the BBC. I can't see them lasting more than another 2 decades in the state they're in now, and then it will be completely impossible for the BBC to continue on. A lot of the modern private sort of deliverers of media would love that. I would like to see the BBC reform itself and become a stalwart of media delivery, because they do have a lot of good things on their side. They just don't seem to be willing to push forward with you know, a reformation of the delivery of media from a public supported forum, you know, because it's supported by our tax dollars, you know what I mean. The TV licence is a tax, let's face it. We are taxed. Anybody who has a computer that can view television or a TV in your house, you're paying a licence. That's a tax. Goes to the BBC for them to produce their programmes. I don't see a problem with that. I quite like that way of paying for it. You know, public broadcast is a thing I think any you know, sort of modern democratic country needs to have, and I don't understand why the Americans are down on the, what is it, the PRN or something like that they've got, public, you know, PM, I don't know. Anyway, you know, they've got a public access thing as well, and they should try and hold on to that, because it's really, really important for people to have access to that kind of broadcasting. And then I'm going to move on now, changing the subject, move on to politics. The Conservative Party, what can you say about them? Pretty much like the BBC. They don't like change. Any change that they do get is normally forced upon them, either by their competitors or by the backbenchers who don't like the way that, you know, the old fogies who are holding on to all the top positions in the Conservative Party refuse to change, and we've always done it this way, you know, and this is the way we'll always do it, you know, that sort of thing. They're as bad as the BBC, you know, and it's the same kind of people, I'm sorry to say it, but it's the same kind of people you see at the head of the BBC as you see at the head of the fucking, you know, the Conservative Party. You know, wankers who don't understand that life has moved on. It's left them behind. Their thinking is old, outdated. They need to modernise, you know. And this idea, oh God, they're going into Europe now demanding, you know, we don't pay any more money to Europe. Fuck all that shit. You've really got to, you know, stand up for yourselves, Conservatives, man. You've got to tell the fucking Commission, the European Commission, where they've got to get off, you know. They shouldn't be able to tell us that we can't fucking kick someone out of the country that we don't fucking want here. Simple as that. All you've got to say is it's for fucking national security, and fucking I don't give a shit about your human rights fucking project going on in Europe. That's okay for citizens. But when it comes down to someone who's not a British citizen, been given leave to stay here, and then we find out that he's working against the benefits and the trust that he was given by being given status to stay here, you should be able to take that fucker and boot his ass out of the country. Simple as that. So I don't believe that we're going to get any headway, the Conservatives going into Europe now and saying, oh please, let us pay less into Europe. No, fuck that. Keep paying the fucking money, but because you're paying that money, you should be able to turn around and say, oh by the way, see that law that you're trying to pass and force upon us? Fuck that. Stick it up your ass, we're not going to comply. Britain needs to turn around and say, we agree with the basics of the Human Rights Act, but these extended human rights that you're trying to give to everybody in the world, they just don't work, and we're not going to comply with them. You can do that, and if they fine you, yeah, do what France and Germany does. Accept the fine and then don't fucking pay it. Drag it out. Oh, we'll send you a cheque next week. It's in the mail, honestly. That's what the French and Germans do. They just don't fucking comply with the laws, and they get fined by the European Court, and then they don't pay the money for fucking 30 years, you know what I mean? I don't see why Britain couldn't do that as well. Why do we have to be the fuckers who, we got a fucking bill from Europe, let's pay it, you know what I mean? Fuck that shit, you know what I mean? Anyway, the Conservatives, I don't see them making any headway, as I say, in Europe, and the party are divided. Half the party want to sort of go along with Europe, maybe try and argue about how much money we pay into Europe. The other half of them are sort of like, fuck that, let's fucking get a referendum, let's ask the people if we should stay in Europe, and let's tell them no, let's get out, let's become an independent nation, still selling into Europe, but not part of Europe, like we are with the fucking currency. We're not euros, you know what I mean? We're fucking the pound, we're the bulldogs, and no, fuck that as well, you know what I mean? We've got to be in Europe, let's face it. But if you don't like the treaty that's being forced upon you, don't fucking sign it. As simple as that, you know what I mean? The 3 fucking main treaties we've signed over the last fucking 40 years in fucking Europe, every single one of them ended up giving Britain a bad fucking deal, because the politicians who were in power and discussing it and signing it at the time were too chicken shit to fucking stand up for the British fucking side of things, you know what I mean? Well, I can only say that if that's the way that the politicians are, they should never have been elected. They should never have been sent to fucking Europe by the people in power at the time. The governments in power at the time should never have sent someone who's willing to fucking knuckle under and accept a poor deal on behalf of Britain. And I don't see anything different happening now. Cameron is going to accept a poor fucking deal, as the Conservatives always fucking do. They'll come back after taking a completely shitty fucking deal with Europe, and they'll say, this is the best deal we could get, which is bullshit, because if you don't sign the deal, you don't have to take the deal, and then the Europeans have to find some way of convincing you to get on board with it, otherwise they can't ratify either. And let's face it, all those ratifications that we had over the last sort of 12 years, most countries in Europe voted against it when they put it to the electorate. It's the politicians who turned around and says, well, we asked the public, they voted no, and we let them think we were going to say no, and then secretly behind their back we renamed the treaties, we renamed the signatory, the policies we were going to sign on to, changed what they were, and then we just didn't ask them again since they'd said no the first time, and then we just signed it and ratified it and pushed it through, because they don't really care about the public. And this is the thing, people in Britain, you've got to stop voting for these fucking assholes. You've got to stop voting for people who support the banks, the big corporations, the huge tax fucking breaks for corporations and international corporations who, well, if you don't fucking give us a big tax break, we'll not put our headquarters in Britain. But they don't put their headquarters in Britain anyway. Once they're in Europe, they put their headquarters in fucking Ireland, or they put it in fucking Switzerland. who, by the way, isn't really a European nation. Switzerland is still independent, yet they're part of Europe as far as it comes for tax reasons for corporations. So they can put the corporate tax into Switzerland as a fucking post box, and they pay their tax through Switzerland at 10 points lower than what they would in Germany, France or Britain. Yet they sell all their fucking shit in Germany, France and Britain, which they should be paying tax on. That doesn't make any fucking sense to me. But anyway. So, that's what I've been thinking about the bullshit with fucking Europe. And we're going through another round of it now. The Conservatives are back in Europe arguing that Britain pays too much money into the European Union for what we get. And they're talking about maybe renegotiating the fish treaty, and maybe renegotiating the farmers deal. And they're never going to renegotiate that. The rest of Europe are happy getting more money out of the fucking, these fisheries and farming deals than Britain gets. They're not going to say, oh, Britain should pay less and they should be able to renegotiate these deals. No, they like the deals that fucking we signed up to. Because we were conned, didn't you? We fucking were conned to vote for the fucking assholes who went over there and ratified these fucking deals without actually asking us what we think. And then you have thousands of fucking farmers losing their businesses, thousands of fishermen losing their businesses, hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs going into Europe, from Britain. Okay, America's complaining about the jobs going to China, but we are shutting down manufacturing jobs. We have been for the last 30 years, shutting down manufacturing jobs all across the country in Britain and sending them to fucking Europe. You think the Europeans are going to say, oh, let Britain have the manufacturing jobs back? We were bad to do that to them? No, they're fucking happy. They got all that work for their fucking citizens, and what did we get? We get a huge fucking load of unemployed people we have to fucking pay unemployment to. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we shouldn't pay their unemployment. What I'm saying is we should be giving them jobs so we don't have to pay their unemployment. How many people do you hear talking in Parliament about actually making jobs? No, they're not talking about producing jobs. They're not talking about, in a downturn in the economy, it's the government's job, the government's business to push for full employment. No. Their idea is to give tax breaks to companies who are already getting huge tax breaks and hope beyond hope, dream beyond dream, that these companies will not keep saving that money we give them the tax breaks up as a huge gigantic fund to give themselves bonuses at the end of the year. No, we're hoping after hope, or the government is, that they will eventually turn around and build a new factory and employ 1,000 people here and 10,000 people there. But it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to fucking happen. So, what would I do? I think it's time for the government to actually, come forward with some ideas of starting new age businesses. I don't see the problem with the government opening up a factory producing solar panels and a factory producing wind turbines, employing the unemployed to build and market them, and then once those companies become financially viable, then selling them off to the managers and the workers as a going concern, give them a loan, give them a government loan to buy the company from the government and set up as a private company, who eventually over the next 20 years, 30 years, pays the government back all the money that's invested in starting that business up, and the loan that we give them to buy the company out. And then they can go on the stock market after, say, they've paid back 50% of the money to start those businesses and the loans to buy it out. Once they've paid 50%, they would then be allowed to float themselves on the stock market. Obviously, the management and every worker would have shares in the company. That would be a stipulation, so that it couldn't just be bought out by some humongous fucking multinational somewhere in China or America or Germany, and move all that work somewhere else and shut it down again, because that would defeat the purpose of the government starting these businesses up in the first fucking place. So anyway, I don't know if anybody understands what I'm trying to say here. I mean, that's what a bare bones exercise I'm talking about there. It's a bare bones sort of description of what I'm talking about. I'm sure it would be very, very more convoluted and you know, take a lot more work to set up. But that's the sort of thing I think the government should be doing for the future of the country. If you want to be involved in high technological advanced manufacturing, and you can't attract private industry to build it here themselves, the government should build it, employ people, run it for a few years. Once it becomes financially viable, sell off to the management and workers, with them getting shares, both the management and the workers, and taking on the debt to pay back for the investment and the buyout. And over a period of decades, pay the government back for it and become a going concern in the world as a world exporter of these high technologies, as well as perhaps getting governmental discretion and places where it'd be suitable to set up a wind farm. And these companies themselves who make the wind turbines, maybe they could actually build a wind turbine farm, set it up, link it to the net, the energy network, and sell that electricity to the grid. And that would be a way for them to actually pay back, once they became a going concern, pay back the funds that the government has put in to start it up. Solar panels, yeah, we should be building the solar panels to the best specification we get. I hear that today you can make solar panels that don't even need the sun to shine on them. You could even put solar panels on the roofs in Scotland, and so long as it's a normal day, maybe overcast with cloud, it would still be making electricity because it doesn't need direct sunlight. It just needs light, I hear they're becoming more and more efficient all the time. You should be working on that, you know what I mean? Anyway, yeah, that's my idea anyway for how Britain could help get itself out of fucking shit. And stop just pandering to these motherfucking global companies who don't give a shit about Britain, don't give a shit about the British worker, couldn't give a fuck if we educated our kids, because, they're not for educated people, you know what I mean? They'll just buy educated people from India or China or, wherever, They'll pay for them to go through college, or they'll let them borrow money for the government to go through college, and then they'll pay them $10 extra to go and work for them once they fucking graduate. And the government loses all that money it's paid, in free education. And the private companies, they fucking soak up all the brains by paying them a tiny wee bit extra after they've graduated and got their fucking certificates. Bollocks that, man. I mean, if you're giving people a free education, there's another thing as well, education. Just say I was the Scottish government, and I'm saying it's totally free for Scottish students to come in and go to university and have a 4 years degree in engineering, physics, mathematics, electronics, plumbing, you know what I mean? A 2 year fucking, plumbing degree. I would say after you qualify, you've got to work in Scotland for 4 years. You've got to work for 4 years in Scotland, and you must devote some of that time to working for, your local council or whatever. I know this is sort of, again, it's got a thin line of possibilities. I'm not fleshing it out. There's not a lot of detail in it. There's a lot more convoluted sort of things that have to be discussed and how it would work. But it's an idea that I'm putting out there that, if you're getting a free education supplied by your government, perhaps you should have to work within the country that provided that free education for you for a few years, paying back your loans, paying back some taxes, in order for us to recoup some of that investment in you. That's all I'm trying to say. I think it's a good idea. I think it could be more fleshed out and worked through by people who are brainier than me, or more geeky or nerdy than me, and it would be a thing that could be set up and work, Anyway, I know I'm crazy. I've got these crazy fucking ideas I come up with all the fucking time, But I don't see that they're bad ideas, especially in the global economy that we're in today. If you as a government waste a lot of money paying private industry to come here, or if you come here, we'll pay 60% of the cost of building your factory for you, then they're here 2 years, then they shut the factory down and fuck off. You know what I mean? Leaving the government with debt that isn't paid, we built that factory for you. But they sell the factory to some other cunt, keep the money, and the government loses out on that 60% they put into that factory, because it never stipulated that if you leave in 2 years we get the factory back. No. And that's what you should do. If it was a private company doing that, they damn well would make sure that they're not going to have you bugger off and take the factory with you. You know what I mean? No, they would make sure that if you ever leave within 10 years or 30 years, they get the fucking factory back. That's the sort of fucking deals the private fucking industry does. Why does the government just say, sign off, well, we'll pay 60% of the cost of your factory, you move here, we'll give you a fucking huge corporate tax cut for the first 10 years, you're here 5 years, shut the factory down, wait off all the workers and fuck off because, you know, some other country's doing the same to you in 5 years' time. Fuck that, you know what I mean? You've got to stay here for 10 years or we get the factory back and you pay us back all the money we fucking loaned you. You know what I mean? That would be written in the small print. If you leave before the time and before you've paid us all back, blah blah blah, we get all that back. You know what I mean? That's the sort of fucking contracts the government should be fucking making, you know? And if the cunts don't want to take it, then they were intending to stay here for 10 years anyway. Fuck them. You know? You might as well fucking set up the factory yourself as a government, as I said, and employ the unemployed to work in the fucking thing and compete against those fucking companies. You know what I mean? And then once it's a going concern, sell it to the fucking management and workers of that factory as a private concern, but it's a British private concern then. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, I think some of these ideas are worth fucking looking at, you know? So on you fucking bar, motherfucker.